Commission. Today is Thursday, May 7th, I believe. Yes, that's correct. And I will first take the roll of the commissioners present. Commissioner Partridge?
Here.
Commissioner Hom?
Here.
And I'm also here. So with that, before we start the meeting, we have 2 items on the agenda today. But before we start, I would just like to note that it is Public Service Recognition Week. I think that having now been in public service for a significant amount of my career and worked with true public servants, both here at the state, but then also when I worked for the federal government, I deeply, deeply appreciate the work that they do, and our staff works on these issues with a level of integrity and commitment that I really do admire, and sometimes I just marvel at it. So I really appreciate all the work that public servants do for our state and our country, and I just wanted to make that note first before we start the hearing that, you know, we are here right now, but all of this is just but the tip of a mountain, and that work is really important, and I'm glad that we get to recognize them for that work. So with that, we will start with our first item for the day. Ms. Terwilliger.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. Item number 1 is docket number E002M-25-142 in the matter of Xcel Energy's 2025 Integrated Distribution Plan. This is a subset of the IDP, so the question before the Commission today is should the Commission approve, modify, or reject Xcel Energy's proactive upgrade proposal? What type and amount of cost cap should the Commission establish for the total proactive distribution upgrade costs, and should the Commission approve Xcel Energy's proposed tariff pages? Unlike most of my dockets, there were no late file decision options. Parties are here. Xcel, the Department, the OAG, and Fresh Energy are here in person, and ELPC, CEF, and Vote Solar are all online. I have nothing further, but am available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Williger. With that, would parties who are here come forward? We're not going to do opening statements. We'll move directly to Commissioner questions. I do have a couple questions. And we're going to start with, we'll start first with the Attorney General, and then we'll move to my right. So, Mr. Schultz.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Peter Schultz on behalf of the Office of the Attorney General, Residential Utilities Division.
Morning, Chair. Will Mulhern with Fresh Energy.
Good morning, Sydney Lieb with the Minnesota Department of Commerce. I'm joined by Ari Zwick online.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Riley Cowan on behalf of Xcel Energy. Good morning, Brian Munson with Xcel Energy.
And then online.
Good morning, James Gow on behalf of the Environmental Law and Policy Center, Cooperative Energy Futures, and Vote Solar. And with me are my colleagues Erica McConnell, Cody Davis, and Puya Najmei.
Thank you, Mr. Gow. And, okay, Mr. Zwick, if you just want to introduce yourself if you get called.
Chair Sullivan, I'm Ari Zwick with the Minnesota Department of Commerce.
All right. Let's move to Commissioner questions. Are there any Commissioner questions? All right, I will start. I was a little bit, I'm just going to start. I think this is a question for Mr. Gow and Mr. Mulhern. If I was a little bit surprised that, not in a necessarily a bad way, but I thought that when I looked at it, the proposal that Xcel made seemed to make a lot of sense to me. You know, if there's going to be, a significant amount of upgrades on the distribution system, it makes sense to me that that would be in Minneapolis. That makes sense to me that, you know, there's going to be EVs there and solar and storage over the next decade. So I was a little bit surprised at that you guys were like, hey, pump the brakes. So if you could just tell me a little bit more about why your overall position was what it is, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to start. So I would agree that the proposal also made a lot of sense to us. I think the reason that we're not supporting approval right now just comes down to timing, and also not fully understanding the company's perspective on what the risks would be of delaying this to the next IDP. So I think we see value in this project. It meets the requirements of the framework, but we also think that it could be proposed in 2027. It wouldn't have any risk to meeting the need before it materializes. And it wasn't clear to us why it would need to happen now versus then, if there was any additional risk that would be created by waiting. And so that's where we reached that conclusion.
Mr. Gao?
Thank you, Chair Sullivan. I would echo those same concerns. We think the location of the upgrade certainly makes sense, especially in a neighborhood that's seeing more beneficial electrification. But our concerns are also with optimizing the timing. Here, we just don't see that much downside to deferring the upgrade until 2027. And we're also mindful of the rebuttable presumption of cost prudency that's in the framework. I think that would be criterion I-7. The main unknown, it seems here, is just whether the load growth will materialize or not. And if the forecasts are off and that load growth does not materialize, then this feeder, it could turn out that the costs would fall upon ratepayers, but criterion I-8 of the framework says that after the fact, changes in load growth after construction of the feeder begins, that's not grounds for challenging the rebuttable presumption of prudency. So that's our concerns, are mainly just with timing.
Okay. Mr. Conlon, do you want to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll start, and then I might hand a few points to Mr. Munson to my left here to work through. But I think at a very high level, we understand and appreciate the timing and forecasting concerns that have been flagged by stakeholders in this record. And I think in a vacuum, that's valuable. But I think as we step back here, I think one thing we've been very mindful of is this is a completely new process, and approval in this proceeding would give the company, commission, and stakeholders additional time to assess and refine this framework as we have a project then that would be approved. And so we think that's consistent with the overall scope of what a proactive upgrade should look like, and having this relatively, from our perspective, modest proposal before the commission now provides opportunity for learnings that can be brought forward in 2027. And while we understand the timing with 2027, that also there might be other things brought forward in 2027 that could benefit from the learnings we would have now. And in terms of distribution system risks, I'll turn that over to Mr. Munson to address a little bit further.
Mr. Munson?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I think when it comes to distribution system risk, we would agree that there technically is no risk of delaying the implementation of this process. However, noting that it does align with, we believe it aligns with the requirements of the framework. And I would just also add that utility forecasts are inherently uncertain, and we believe that the framework for the proactive grid upgrades was set up in a way that allows for that and considers that and puts appropriate checks and balances in place, not only through the modification request process, where should the need for the upgrade change as a result of forecast shifts, that would require us to come back for essentially as a modification request. And then similarly with the rebuttable presumption, the language states that it's that upgrade completed consistent with the decision are prudent. And so I think our view is that if the forecast were to change so much to the point that the need for the project were to shift, that would no longer be consistent with the decision to approve the project.
Yeah. I mean, I hear the concerns that are raised. Dr. Lieb, if you want to weigh in, or Mr. Schultz, I mean, I'd be interested in hearing your perspective. But I do feel like this, and I don't mean to, I'm not saying this is, I do view this in the entire exercise of proactive grid upgrades as a bit speculative. I mean, they're proactive. There's a certain amount of, you don't know the future, so there's speculation there. like, this seems to me a pretty, I feel a high degree of confidence that this is where I would be building out the distribution system. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot or anything, but I'd love to, I mean, I'm looking to you for some more
Chair
thoughts on
Sullivan,
this.
I'm happy to address that because I don't think we disagree with that premise. In theory, I think we feel like this is the wrong proposal under which to do this. So I think our real challenge is that the load forecast is uncertain, but it doesn't need to be as uncertain as it currently is. And I think that we would rather see this come forward again in 2027 with a much more robust, improved forecast. I think the things we really are concerned about are if you do a comparison of backwards look to the forecast is consistently overbuilding or over predicting the load forecast. And so I think there's a lot more work the company could do to try to improve that load forecast. One of the things that I think would be really important is that we made this very large investment in AMI. So there's no reason why the AMI can't help them better understand their forecast. I think as you're thinking about, there's likely more electric vehicles, there's likely more electrification, but right now the company's not using AMI to help them understand where those things are being deployed and where there are true, better supported data needs that are showing there's an increased load forecast. And so I don't think we're saying no to this process in general. We're just saying this level of forecast uncertainty is unacceptable for us to make an investment in the system that's not well supported. And I think to the questions you asked Mr. Mulhern, we need to make sure that electric rates stay reasonable and low so that people have an incentive to electrify their vehicles or electrify their buildings. And in order to do that, we need to make sure we're being really careful about what level of investment, what expectations of capacity. And so I think the company themselves is saying there's no risk to the system if we delay this to 2027. I think that what there is risk to is ratepayers is if we overbuild the system based on a forecast that we all agree is not great, then we have a risk of sort of stifling the electrification that we want to see on the system.
Mr. Scholes.
Yeah, I guess I would echo a lot of what's been said. I think the point of, why couldn't we use this as a sort of a pilot project? I think the point of the framework is to approve projects for which there is a need, even though it's a proactive one, it's farther out. And that in our view, Xcel hasn't shown even a proactive need in this case. I'm not sure what Xcel will learn from building a feeder that it wouldn't learn from just, let's come back next year, see what the forecast looks like, see what's shifted or what hasn't. So I'm just not sure of the learnings that would be gained from going forward with a project that doesn't appear to be needed anytime soon.
I'm going to follow up with Xcel, but Commissioner Partridge or Commissioner Hom, did you have any thoughts?
I have maybe a thought that I haven't thought enough about, but I'll say it out loud anyway. I guess to me, I came in at this pretty ambivalent, feeling like, well, I don't know which way to go. It's a relatively small investment. We could go ahead and make it, learn from that investment, and use that going forward for larger scale investments that we'll make through this proactive framework. I think what I'm sort of hearing is, yes, there is no risk in waiting. I guess the question is there a benefit in doing these things proactively? And is this an issue where, Mr. Schultz, to your point, where you don't feel like this is a needed upgrade at all and that there's no reason to proactively go after this? Or do you feel like the idea of proactively investing in the grid? I mean, I think the idea of a proactive investment is that we do have greater uncertainty whenever we make a decision early. And so we're going to have uncertainty if we continue to make proactive upgrades. And so for me, it's just where do you believe there is value in proactive upgrades? And if so, why does this one not meet that? Or do you think that we shouldn't really be proactive here because it has too much uncertainty?
Mr. Schultz.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Partridge, those are good questions. I think for some of the reasons you've articulated, we've had sort of some discomfort with the whole proactive exercise because it just adds into the uncertainty, and that's what we're seeing here with our first proactive project. I think we certainly think there could be value in proactive upgrades. I just think we don't have the comfort that this is the right choice. I mean, this is the only project that was presented. There isn't any need in this even, almost within 10 years probably. I mean, and we don't know that what would be the benefit of investing here versus another place. I mean, I think that's another thing that gives us pause given the record that we have.
I want to, Commissioner Hom.
Thank you, Chair Sullivan. So a little bit different angle, but I'll ask questions. So for Xcel, this Phillips neighborhood is very proactive neighborhood. People are very engaged. Have you talked with people and neighborhood organization?
Mr. Monson.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Hom, no, we haven't related to this project specifically, have not reached out to community partners in that particular area. However, we do have folks within Xcel more broadly who do engage with communities such as that.
Two reasons. One is I think that forecasting uncertainty can be overcome by communicating with the local. Two, at the end of the day, you have to build the feeder line. This is a very dense neighborhood. I don't know whether without talking to community, whether even you can think about building anything there.
Mr. Monson.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, we would agree that gathering that input from the community and even from developers as well is a really important part of this process. That was actually laid out in the framework under requirement C.8, which requires us to engage with stakeholders to gather for purposes of gathering input into our forecast. The reason we weren't able to do that for this particular one was just because the timing was a little bit abnormal, just from the timing of when the framework was implemented until when we submitted the first proactive upgrade proposal, which was only just a few months of difference. So we weren't able to do that for this particular upgrade, but for future proactive upgrade proposals, that is our intention, is in compliance with that requirement.
So with potential approval today, you can engage with the community. If the community says, no, thank you, what will be a potential ratepayer impact if you cancel this project?
Mr. Monson.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, it would just depend on the timing of when we were to pull the project. Had we started to incur costs, there would be impacts there. But for example, like in this particular case, we're planning to engage with stakeholders and gather input from the community in the first half of this year. And so if we were to hear back from that area saying that there's no particular interest in developing electric vehicle charging or beneficial electrification in that area, we would have time to pull that project back before we've incurred any costs.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for those questions, Commissioner Hom. A question I have for the department is, does the cost allocation framework or the cost recovery framework, does that mitigate your concerns about ratepayer impact? I mean, the way that I think about this is that, there's going to be the people who are to take advantage of these upgrades are going to, over the life of the project, they're going to pay for them. And that will therefore mitigate the cost to Xcel's ratepayers.
So, Chair Sullivan, I think that's a good question. The challenge is that if Xcel makes the upgrade and then the folks who are taking advantage of the upgrade to contribute to the cost share don't materialize, then that upgrade will not get paid for by those folks, which I think, again, points to why it's really important to make sure that we have relatively decent forecast accuracy on where we're going to do these projects and ensure that if they make the upgrade, that it's going to be used in the way they anticipate it being used.
Mr. Monson, could you respond to the forecast uncertainty?
Mr. Chair, I think our concerns around...
And specifically, why does the forecast give you enough comfort, to move forward?
Yeah, I think certainly, especially when we're looking on this time range of outside of our traditional planning cycle, beyond, say, year 6, but before year 10, you're entering a window of just inherent uncertainty, and sort of no amount of refining data will completely eliminate that uncertainty. And I think concerns that have been raised about the accuracy of our forecasts, we don't really agree with the way that those have been characterized. I think one important thing to distinguish here is that when we're building a forecast for purposes of planning upgrades on the system, specifically proactive upgrades as well, we build what we call a planning forecast, which is distinguished from an operational forecast, where an operational forecast you're trying to predict what is most likely to happen in the next year, whereas for a planning forecast we're trying to anticipate what could happen so that we can build the system out to be prepared for that. Specifically, like looking at a forecast accuracy assessment of just comparing year over year, like we forecasted the peak load next year to be X and the actual turned out to be Y, that's not really, in our view, an accurate way of assessing the accuracy of our forecasts, because there are many factors that might impact what that peak would be. It's impacted by the weather circumstances that happened that year, the economy, other factors as well. And so we're looking at a broad, like a longer term view, where we're trying to anticipate should, the right weather conditions arise and economic conditions arise that would drive a peak load similar to what we may have seen in a larger historical window, we need to be prepared and have the system be prepared to meet that reliably.
Okay. I suppose that, there's the forecasts, and that's our prediction for what things are going to look like in the future. But another way, and I'd be curious if I didn't see anything in the record to this point, but another way to ascertain or to figure out what is likely to happen in the future is like what's going on the ground right now within the Phillips neighborhood. Like I would imagine that you see some activity, for solar and EVs, and is that more or less or kind of about average within your service territory? Or can you give us any kind of ground level information that you have about what's going on there now that gives you, comfort in proposing the project?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I don't have the specifics for that particular area, but I will say that our ability to assess what, for example, EV charging at a residential level, or perhaps like electrification, like electric water heaters as an example, our ability to assess how much of that is there today is somewhat limited. Really only if the customer has had to apply for service connection for that in particular would we have identified that, or if they're enrolled in one of our programs for example, EV charging, would we understand that. However,
can't you see some of that like through the smart metering system that you have? Can't you, you can get some of that, it's clear that something's clicking on at 9 o'clock, or it's clear that, you can just see it in the patterns of the electric usage. Isn't that, I think that's what the department is saying, is like you're not using that infrastructure to its fullest.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And as we've brought our AMI deployment towards completion, we're starting to build out that data set to be able to do that analysis and do that load disaggregation to identify, it appears based on their load patterns, that they're have an EV charger or something like that. But the problem with that is we need to have a reasonable level of historical data, and with the recency of our AMI deployment, we're still sort of building that out actively, and that will continue to build over time as we build a better, more robust data set to do that analysis on.
That's helpful. Commissioner Partridge.
Chair Sullivan, I was thinking you might were about to ask about eco data and, the uptake of electrification.
I knew that could come, and I was just going to.
You have data about what customers are seeking rebates for electric heat pumps, electric vehicle chargers, et cetera. So, that's another data source. I don't know if you've looked at that, but
Mr. Munson.
An indication.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, that's correct. To the extent that we do have that information about customers that are participating in our programs, our demand response programs, for example, we do incorporate that information to the extent we're able into our forecasts.
Okay. And I will note that while the IRA rebates are, not as strong as they were, you have seen really high uptake of your efficient fuel switching programs through ECO, higher than expected by a lot, I believe. So and continued good programming could continue to drive that. I think this is a classic Field of Dreams conundrum. And, if you want to be Kevin Costner, I wouldn't blame you. I'm open.
I'm kind of Waterworld, Kevin Costner.
Okay.
Commissioner Hom.
Thank you, Chair Sullivan. For the departments and all other parties opposing, so Minnesota has a greenhouse gas reduction goal, and we are behind, right? And electricity generation side, we are cruising in right direction, right speed to achieve 2040 zero carbon goal. However, building electrification, transportation, we have a challenge. I think we have to think this more bigger picture, whether we are going to rely on historical data forecasting versus are we going to show our leadership. I know that we shouldn't put a lot of ratepayers' money at the risk, but I think you may want to think about what is the good balance between leadership versus solely based on the historical data, which shows that we are failing. So I don't have any strong position on this issue either, but I think this is kind of whether we are going to show leadership versus we are going to just follow it. So,
Dr. Lieb.
Chair Sullivan, Commissioner Hom, I think we agree with you completely, but I think that's why we feel like, as I think the company's exemplified, the forecast that they have could be substantially better by next year if the commission denies this proposal and tells them that they need to come back with a better forecast, because this is a relatively small amount of money, but I think there's a concern around precedent and also just all the little bits of money we throw at things add up. And again, electric rates have to stay relatively low for people to make the switch to electric vehicles, make the switch to electrified home heating and water heating. And we need to be really careful about how we plan and make upgrades on the system. And I think we do this on the bulk system. When we're doing transmission, when we do this on resource planning, we have really robust forecasts and we test those and we look at sensitivities and we make sure that we're building the right size system. The distribution system is becoming an increasingly larger bucket of capital spend. It's almost as large as the company's transmission budget now. It's doubled. And I think we need to start looking at these investments more carefully. We need to start testing the forecasts, testing the sensitivities around those forecasts, looking at locational differences. Because if we just sort of start overbuilding the system and the load doesn't show up, the rates are going to go up and it's going to make it harder to make that transition over to electrification. And again, I think there's an opportunity to lead, but it's next year.
Thank you. I think we have to be very careful at distinguishing between replacement of the aging distribution line system. I think bulk part of companies' distribution system spending is replacing the aging infrastructure. We cannot delay it. Meantime, that doesn't mean that Xcel can do everything they want. We should optimize it. I agree with you. But this is about adding new feeder line, which is a bit different from replacement of existing infrastructure because due to the age and my position in transmission and distribution both. Whenever we need to spend money, we need to optimize it. But I think this is adding new feeder in prediction with the best knowledge they have. I think everybody agree on that part, whether it's today or tomorrow. But that's why I think we have to think a little bit more in macro level rather than very focused on this specific issue. Thank you.
Okay, this has been, I appreciate the questions and the conversation. I feel in this particular, I'm ready to make a motion, but for me, like, I hear what you guys are saying, and I hear the point that we need some more rigor around the analysis, and the questions that I asked Xcel helped me better understand your point. That being said, I still think like this is all speculative, but in my view, like this is where I would be putting my own money. And that makes a lot of sense to me. Like with what is in the record, I feel comfortable. This is a small amount of money. I think that from my perspective, what I would like to see Xcel do when they come back is incorporate what you've heard in this conversation. Like I would very much like to see more information about like, what is the AMI data showing? What are the eco rebates showing? What is like, why do you get to where you are? And that could help buttress a future forecast. But from my perspective, I'm comfortable moving forward. I think that's kind of where my colleagues are, but I'll let you guys speak for yourself.
Yeah, and I will add to what you said to say that I think there's also opportunity between now and implementation of this to continue to review data. I am looking to the company to assure me that you're going to continue to do that you'll provide additional information and make modifications if that is supported by the data you get around usage and uptake of electrification and then DERs.
Mr. Chair.
Conlon?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Partridge. Yes, I think kind of stepping through both questions or discussion points there is to Chair Sullivan's point, we think the framework has set up such that we will continue to incorporate learnings and feedback on forecasting changes that need to be made. And to your point, I think part of that is looking at different sources of data, and I think we're willing to commit to that.
I think that, and I appreciate that. Commissioner Hom?
Thank you, Chair Sullivan. I'll repeat this one more time. I think all these discussions because you don't have a DERMS. AMI data is useful, but also we need to have a DERMS to see what is the optimized usage of that AMI. And probably we wouldn't have this discussion if you already deployed the DERMS and fully utilize distribution system. I think the department's concern, I agree with them. Yes, because the lack of DERMS is giving you a lot of uncertainty. I ask many times, what is your current schedule to deploy those DERMS?
Mr. Munson?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Hom, our current schedule for deploying DERMS takes us into Q3, if I'm not mistaken, of this year, and that is for our limited deployment of grid DERMS, which is part of our roadmap for moving towards a broader enterprise DERMS.
So that means geographical specific location or the level of deployment of DERMS with the different optimization. I know that in the DCP, you talks about trying to respond to the system level, but I think at the end of the day, this kind of project need distribution system optimization along with the system optimization. So if it's a geographical optimization, can you include this neighborhood?
Mr. Munson?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Hom, I think, the limited deployment of grid DERMS has its own capabilities that are primarily related to getting enhanced visibility and control of control signals that are sent to DER assets in the field. And currently we're envisioning that for larger, like front of the meter assets, like DCP assets, for example. However, that broader perspective of geographic optimization of DER across areas, we view that as sort of a future use case that's part of the roadmap and evolution of these DERMS tools that are sort of actively growing within the industry.
Okay. Well, this has been a good conversation, and I have appreciated everybody's comments and participation in it. So with that, I'm going to move decision options 1, 4, 7, and 8 with what I hope will be, I hope the order will reflect that in the future, Xcel needs to put more information in there about the topics that we discussed, and that we need to see, we just need to see some more when we're looking at these speculative forecasts and in these dockets to give us more comfort. But with that, I'm happy to move to a vote unless there's any discussion. Commissioner Hum.
Thank you, Chair Sullivan. I can support this motion on the one condition. Xcel should proactively engage with the neighborhood and bring us something, even though it's not in the order. Give us the information about your community engagement in two. One is a load forecasting issue, and two, siting of this feeder line, because we don't want to spend hardware before we already know what's going on in the forecasting, and then whether people's acceptance of this siting this infrastructure.
Do you want a decision point on that? Or do you want?
I think they already have that in the schedule. It's just a matter of just they either file that or work with the department and other party to make sure that you are comfortable to procure your hardware before you move on. I think you should have that discussion.
Mr. Munson or Mr. Conlon?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Hom, we can commit to that and bring something back. In terms of timing, would you be looking for a compliance filing, or would you look for something in the 27 IDP?
My view is anytime before you buy anything.
Understood.
Sure, Dr. Lieb.
Chair Sullivan, on number 8, the department would prefer 60 days rather than 30. 30 gets a little bit tight for folks, if you all are open to that.
Let me, yep. We're good with that. 60 days. All right. We can make that change. We're good? Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. Thank you to everybody. We can now move on to our second item of the day. Mr. Dobson, you weren't going to let Mr. Conlon keep the baton on this? All right. Well, let us begin.
Morning, Chair Sullivan, Commissioners. Item 2 on the agenda is docket E002/AA.
Mr. Hersey, could you actually start over? And I don't think we can hear you. You might have to just kind of lean into it a little bit more.
Okay. Good morning, Chair Sullivan, Commissioners. Item 2 on the agenda is docket E-00/AA-22-179 in the matter of Xcel Energy's petition for approval of its 2023 annual fuel forecast and monthly fuel charges. The question before the Commission are, what is the appropriate amount of replacement power costs incurred by Xcel Energy to serve its Minnesota customers as a result of the October 2023 Prairie Island outage? Whether any demonstrated customer benefits or offsets should reduce the replacement power refund otherwise owed to customers? If so, what is the amount? And should Xcel Energy be allowed to recover its contested case litigation from ratepayers? Staff and parties are available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hersey. We're not planning on having opening statements, so we can move directly to Commissioner questions. Are there Commissioner questions? Okay. Commissioner Partridge.
I will just, I think for the benefit of you all, the other commissioners, I would say, so thank you, Mr. Mohammed, for excellent briefing papers. I expected this to be a very complicated issue, and at the end of the day, it felt like it was fairly simple. I would say I really appreciated and supported the ALJ's report. I did feel swayed, I will say, by the argument that it would be difficult to piece apart internal labor associated with the proceeding versus, whereas the external litigation or the external legal expenses would be very clear. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that that was one area where I did feel like that seemed like a reasonable exception.
No, I appreciate that. I was struggling with that myself, so I appreciate that clarity. And I think why don't we, maybe we could just jump into that. Mr. Schultz, do you want to?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, Peter Schultz with the Office of the Attorney General, Residential Utilities Division. Yeah, thank you for the question. So I think the most important thing from the OAG's perspective is that ratepayers are not put at risk of having to fund costs related to this contested case litigation for the reasons articulated in our briefing and in the LJ's report. I don't see a distinction really in that regard between internal and external costs. As the Commission knows, there's been some controversy or public concern recently about regulatory costs, and the OAG tracks its expenses working on cases. The Department does, the Commission does. I think it's reasonable to expect the company to at least make a compliance filings, articulating what those costs are to the best of its ability, at least for transparency, so the Commission has a record on which to make a decision in a future rate case. Because as the Commission knows, these costs are not incurred in a test year. They're incurred during the time that the current rate case is ongoing, but in a future rate case, oftentimes budgets for the test year are then informed by historical costs, which could be from 25 or 26, depending on how they do their budgeting. And so those costs could sort of indirectly make their way into the cost of service in a future rate case test year, and that's what we're trying to avoid. We're not asking for an adjustment in the current rate case. We're asking them to show that these costs have been adjusted out of a future rate case.
Okay, that makes, yeah, Commissioner Partridge.
As just a practical understanding of your recommendations, so under that, we could potentially say that we pick 9, which is to accept. So 9 would accept Xcel's proposal to not seek recovery of outside expert and legal costs, but then we would continue to accept the ALJ's recommendation that they provide data on actual costs that show internal and external. I mean, number 10. I'm just trying to figure out how to logistically implement that recommendation if we wanted the data, but we aren't going to exclude costs from
Mr.
recovery.
Schultz.
Commissioner, or Mr. Chair and Commissioner Partridge, I mean, to be clear, the OAG's recommendation is that ratepayers not have to pay those costs. If the Commission wants to at least know what those costs are going forward, I don't know if there's a decision option that accomplishes that, but
Okay,
I
that's
think it could be 9 or 10 could be modified to reference internal costs, I suppose.
okay.
Can you help me sorry, Commissioner Partridge, if you're.
Go for it.
Mr. Schultz, can you help me understand? I was a bit vexed by the discussion of, that this was filed, that we cannot go back and, oh God, use your words, Joe. That this was kind of confusing to me in that, I don't quite understand why this is not, these are just legal costs that were budgeted, and, the company pursued its legal strategy, and why would we pull out those legal costs because they were not successful? I mean, how is that? I mean, oftentimes the company, they're successful and sometimes they're not successful. You pay your own way, that's the kind of the system. So help me clarify my confusion if you can.
Sure, Mr. Chair. I mean, the company doesn't pay its own way. Ratepayers pay the company's own way. So So I think if, just because a company budgets for an expense or incurs an expense doesn't mean it needs to be, it's just and reasonable to include that expense in rates. Our position is that these costs for the litigation in no way benefit ratepayers. In fact, Xcel's efforts largely worked against ratepayers' interests. In a civil litigation, each party would bear its own costs. So I know that's not how we always do things in the regulatory sphere, but we think this is a unique enough situation where a different approach is warranted. And, there wasn't, Xcel wanted the contested case. Xcel had already modeled its, replacement power costs before we got referred this to the contested case. And so our position is that the case is primarily a vehicle for them to add a veneer of credibility to these, in our view, unsupported offsets that they wanted to use to reduce the refund from, down to like $7 million from what it should be, which is, by Xcel's own admission, was like at least $34 million, excuse me, in replacement power costs.
Commissioner Partridge.
I understand what you're saying, Mr. Schultz. I just don't think that in reality, the way that the company is structured, let me ask Mr. Dobson, are any of your attorneys paid by the hour internally?
Mr. Dobson.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Mr. Chair, Commissioner Partridge, no, I don't, we're all salaried employees.
And Mr. Dobson, did you hire any internal attorneys to work on this case?
Mr. Dobson.
Okay, so I get what you're saying, but in reality, all of Xcel's legal team are salaried when they get a new case. It's just part of the mix. If they don't hire anyone internally to take any additional person to take on that specific case, to me, had the case not happened, ratepayers still would have paid the same amount, right? Like the budget for the legal team is X, whether the case happened or didn't happen. Probably the attorneys put in more work. They hired external help, which we're saying we don't want ratepayers to pay for. But I don't, from the way I'm looking at it, I don't think this argument, whether it should or shouldn't have happened aside, I don't think this argument changed the budget for Xcel's Minnesota legal team. It might have made their lives less pleasant, but it, which is hopefully a lesson, right? Don't fight about stuff and then, the unnecessarily, but I don't think that it resulted in a higher budget or a higher expense, I should say, for Minnesota ratepayers. So because of that, I don't think it makes sense, and it may be relatively impossible to tease apart the exact salary allocation to every hour that a particular attorney spent on this case, and recognizing that they didn't hire any specific additional attorneys. They're all salaried. They didn't, I should ask Mr. Dobson, did the company provide additional salary benefits because of this case?
Mr. Dobson.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Partridge, no.
So I just don't see, that's the way I'm looking at it. Maybe that's through the wrong lens, but.
That's kind of the way that I'm looking at it too. I understand the point, they shouldn't have pursued this, and the way that I think of it, and I'll turn to you, Commissioner Hom. It feels to me like in the legal context, like this was such a baseless claim. The other side should pay their attorney's fees. Like it's such a baseless case that correct, Mr. Scholes? Like this.
Well, we're not.
You shouldn't have done it.
We're not asking them to pay our attorney's fees.
No, I know not yours, but that the company should have to basically, like the normal course of action is their fees are paid for as a normal course of business. It's loaded up in the rates. But no, we're going to force those payment to come from earnings rather than.
Right, and it is it may be a sunk cost to Xcel, but they might have been able to work on cases in other jurisdictions, and then it wouldn't have been a cost to Minnesota. We don't know that. It's also ratepayers receive no benefit from the incurrence of the expense, and we think that's a reason. And just because a utility incurs a cost doesn't mean it's just and reasonable for it to be included in rates. And we track our time. All the interveners here track our time to a case. It doesn't seem like it should be that difficult.
Commissioner Hom.
Thank you, Chair Sullivan. I have a different view. Are all Xcel lawyers are NSP employee or Xcel Inc. employee?
Mr. Dobson.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Hom, the attorneys are XCS employees.
Okay, they are supposed to do timesheet. They're supposed to allocate certain time they spend on NSP, and they are billing NSP, so that way you can separate their action for NSP, Minnesota, NSP, Wisconsin, and then other Xcel sub.
Mr. Dobson.
That's correct. I think the caveat that I would say to that is the attorneys under my team are basically assigned to NSPM. I do have one who we do some NSPW work, but they are effectively directly assigned. We don't do any work for PSCO or other operating companies.
At least they are working for NSP Wisconsin too.
A little bit, yes.
Okay, and the North Dakota case and the South Dakota case.
That's true, yes.
Yep. So along that line, also, I have another concern on this one because we have a long argument with the utility on this, how rate-making principle goes associated with a certain item that we are going to deal with it in the upcoming rate case decision, because you earn more or you spend less in one item, and you're supposed to true up, and then you have to show commission that overall you are not earning enough to meet your allowed ROE. So this can play that role in that discussion. So that's why I want to make sure that we can separate this item in that discussion, because in that discussion, I have a very strong concern about utility claiming that single item in the rate case should be treated differently as an asset rather than expense. And we have that discussion, ongoing discussion with the multiple utility. So I think we should separate this item as much as we can, at least on the paper. I know practically it may not have an impact to the ratepayers, because in between rate case, it's your money, right? Ratepayer doesn't have to worry about pay more, pay less. However, in that discussion, this information is very useful, at least for me, to argue my position on that part. So yes, I think we need to separate this item, even though practically it may not have an impact to the ratepayer directly as of today.
Mr. Dobson.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Hom, I think so. If what I'm understanding is you're wanting us to report on the amount of time that our attorneys paid for spent on this case, we wouldn't oppose that. That's fine.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's doable, because the records are closed in the rate case, right?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Hom, the evidentiary record is closed in the rate case, yeah. Your record is still open, but there's disagreement about whether.
I think having that information during the rate case decision-making process, that'll help me. Thank you.
Chair Sullivan,
Commissioner Partridge.
Commissioner Hom, do we need an additional decision option outside of what's currently listed for that?
No, I think, as you say, practically there is no impact.
Sure.
But there is some legal debate going on between utility and then other advocates on certain expense item. Utilities claiming that as a prepaid asset. And I think in that discussion, I need this information to counter that discussion.
And do you want a compliance filing added to the decision options, or do you want just the oral agreement to file it?
I think oral argument is good enough. They already know that what I'm going to ask during the rate case decision-making process.
Okay.
Okay, what I would like to do is I would like to take just 10 minutes to talk with staff and then come back. We can put a motion forward and discuss that. And yeah, so that's what we're going to do. We'll take 10 minutes. We'll be back at 11:20. All right, we're back. I think I have a solution to where we are going. So I will propose, unless there are additional questions or comments, I will propose the following motion. I'm going to move decision option 2, but I'm going to remove A and B. And then I have a new alternative 7 that we'll put up on the screen. And this alternative 7 preserves for the discussion in the rate case the issue of the attorney's fees, and there'll be opportunity in the rate case to discuss this further, Commissioner Hom. And for now, there's no disallowance of those fees, but we'll have that discussion in the rate case. And then I'm going to move decision options 11, which is the XLI decision option that requires future fuel clause true-up petitions to include information on unplanned outages. And then I'm going to move decision option 13 that will require Xcel to make a compliance filing within 30 days. So that's my motion. And the other thing I did want to point out is that lest it be missed in this discussion, I think that the main penalty here is the $40 million fine. Like, that's the main, I mean, I think that this public process has worked well. Ratepayers are going to get a $40 million credit in their fuel clause. That doesn't happen every day. And I think that I applaud the work of the department and the OAG and CUB for working on this and getting to the heart of this. This was initially just a little footnote, I think, or just something that was carefully crafted to not be obvious. And the department and the public agencies went and they did their work, and I think it's important that is the penalty here. It's the $40 million fee. So with that,
I have questions.
I'm happy to answer any questions. Yes, Commissioner Partridge.
Thank you. Okay, my question for you is, and this is maybe, I struggled with this motion, not because I didn't know what I wanted to do, but how to piece together the ALJ's report with our decision. And so my question for you is, by leaving out 9 and 10, wouldn't that adopt the ALJ's recommendation that we exclude the costs associated, the internal costs associated with this proceeding, the internal legal costs? So
Let me just think that through here.
Mr. Dobson, or any of the other attorneys up here, I'd also like your input. So we have a compliance filing that we've added to number 7. I believe it is our intent to not ask them to go back and calculate costs and exclude them. And so would we need to adopt 9 in order to make that happen, given what the ALJ report says?
I am checking with staff on this right now, but my thinking is that by rejecting A and B, that we're basically just adopting we would not be that the only change that I would be making is for Commissioner Hom's change, that would require that these filings be made in the rate case.
Right.
Otherwise, I would have just done decision option 1.
So the ALJ recommended that any future rate case or cost recovery proceeding relies on actual cost data showing that the internal and external costs for this contested case have been adjusted out of the test years. And if we don't want that, we have to actively do something to not adopt that.
I felt like that's what we were doing by removing A and B, but that's what I'm verifying with staff.
A and B was suggested by Xcel,
Okay.
which included a large swath of the report. What I was thinking is we wanted to be really targeted about that particular item, and in that particular item, I think we have to make a small, but we need to actively make an adjustment, an exception, and a change to the ALJ's findings. Mr. Dobson, would you weigh in? Am I off base?
Mr. Dobson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Partridge, I think that's right if I'm understanding it. I think with respect to 9, I think I would see that as a little bit of belt and suspenders because I think that's covered in the ALJ report, so you wouldn't have to adopt it, but you could. But
Okay.
I think with respect to 10, I agree based on at least my interpretation of where the commission's going, where it sounds like you wanted to take the issue of internal costs and address them as you've laid out in alternative 7, which I think is inconsistent with 10. That's how I've read it. Yeah.
So our singular adjustment to the ALJ report, or not singular, our adjustment to the ALJ report would be very targeted, new 7 and 10, I think. And I'll look to, okay, I think our legal team is nodding.
They're saying that would
Or
make that
legal.
clear. So then my motion would be, now I see exactly what you're saying. So it's 2, alternative 7, 10, 11, and 13.
Okay.
And I think that gets us where we need to be.
I do too.
Okay.
Perfect.
Commissioner Hom?
Thank you, Chair Sullivan. And I maybe it's not a lot of money, but I think that is very important fundamental question I am going to ask during the rate case. So thanks for
Yeah, and
adopting that. Thank you.
I see that, and I understand, even though I'm where Commissioner Partridge is on this, I still see value in the discussion that you want to have. So, okay. Motion is clear. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes, and that concludes our business for the day. Thank you, everybody. I hope you all have a nice weekend, and we will see you next week. Oh, yes, Friday, next week, Friday.